Hello, I'm back. This video is going to be talking about week 9, the acid rain lesson. So this is 5th grade fall lesson plans week 9, the last one for the fall. This one used to not be fun, but we recently changed it and it's pretty fun now. It's taking that idea of acidity and acids from the previous 2 lessons, mostly the last one, acids and bases, but and moving it to a more real life scenario and like putting it in a realistic stage. So this one, you're going to be talking about how acid rain can affect the environment and what acid rain is. So it's really just rain that is has a pH of around 5, like less than 7. This is also a good way to tie back into your first lesson of the water cycle. You know, it's all comes together, and that's once again why we do this. So talk about acidity and rain and how that precipitation leads to landfill, and groundwater leads to runoff that becomes very harmful for our plants and animals. And then the plants and animals are producing the oxygen that we need to breathe and the carbon dioxide that we exchange with them. So it all, it's a big cyclic process that we're talking about here, and it all comes together. So make sure that they are able to connect those things in their heads. It's a good way to introduce it, talk about the water cycle, talk about acidity, talk about what acid precipitation is. And then in terms of the actual experiment, you're going to be going through both physical and chemical phases, which also ties in with the previous chemistry lessons that we've done. It's a great way to review and revisit and refresh all of the old vocabulary that they have, allow them to refer to their science journals, that's why they write it down, and really enforce that they need to know all these terms. So for the actual experiment, you're going to be having sugar cubes, and for physical weathering, they're just going to hit it. They would use textbooks, books, whatever they had on their desk. Honestly, it's really hard to hit. They're just the basic sugar cubes, but they were really surprised with how difficult it was. So but show how that's like general chipping away of buildings, like old buildings, and that's what happens just with time and with wind and, like any kind of physical change in the atmosphere, that's what happens. And then you're going to be doing the chemical weathering version, so you're going to be having sugar cubes, and then you overlay them with graham crackers, and you use the same droppers. So this is all bringing back techniques that we've used in the past. You can revisit how to use the droppers if necessary. And they're going to be pouring vinegar onto their little house structures. So this is like a model. It's modeling. You can do it as a house, or you can do it as roots. I've done it as both. The roots version is interesting because the graham cracker is like the ground level, and then the sugar cube is like the roots. And so it's showing how when it rains, obviously, precipitation leads to groundwater, leads to runoff, and it affects all of our plants. So when you drop the vinegar on the graham cracker, it first doesn't really do anything, and then eventually the graham cracker gets so soggy that it breaks, and then it reaches the sugar cubes and starts to dissolve the sugar cubes, which shows that like it gets through the dirt in the soil into the roots and then affects plant growth. It halts it, it hinders it, etc. And then that decreases the amount of circulating gases in the air, in the atmosphere. And then that acid rain is still what evaporates, so it goes into the whole cyclic process of the water cycle and affects kind of everything. Plants affect us, plants affect animals, and then you can also model the graham cracker sugar cube experiment off of a building and just describe how acid rain leads to all the calcium carbonate issues in our communities. And honestly, it affects a lot of different aspects, so just make sure you emphasize the importance of not polluting and making sure, like, this is why we throw away our trash, this is why we recycle. Like, you don't put your trash outside for a reason, and that's because it leads to acid rain. And like, you practice safe and clean techniques so that our plants are able to grow healthily. And that goes with like car emissions, like walking, biking. So introduce all these things that they can be doing to live a healthier lifestyle. And it's really a good way to bridge the gap between kind of like science and real life, because a lot of them think that science is like this complicated, complex thing that they're very intimidated by. And it's important to stress that it's existing whether we like it or not. So it's really cool to understand it because it makes the whole world better, and it comes in so many different forms. So honestly, like the discussion part of this experiment was one of my favorites because it really brought out their understandings, and it was a time when they were becoming more confident with me and with each other and with the whole process of how these science lessons went. So it was great to really initiate some questions to get them thinking and talking and learning how to live their best lives for us and for everything around us. So make sure you utilize that aspect if you've noticed that your class is more talkative, and it's a really great one to make them feel mature and make them feel more connected to our environments.